Yeah, good day. Welcome back to the channel. Long-time viewers would know I should have been working on my lathe CNC conversion project, but been a little busy in the last couple of weeks. Had a few other things I needed to get done. Work, life kind of gets in the way, and I'm also not going to work on it this week. Sorry about that. If you're getting withdrawal symptoms for Linux CNC conversion of industrial CNC lathes, go check out Andrew Becks Carbidecutters NZ. His video chops are still a bit ropey, but the machine project he's doing is really awesome. Check it out, I'll leave a link. When I did the Shelblin gearbox, I asked whether you guys want me to review this cheap and nasty sandblasting cabinet. There were a lot of requests to do that review, so why don't I do that now, get it out of the way. So this is just your small generic sort of cabinet which you can buy cheaply at your local sort of tool store and that. I'm sure they're sold under 50 different names. You know, the brand really means nothing. The lid's just some sort of plastic or perspex. It's got a protective sheet on it. It's about time that came off. Might even be able to see a little better. I should have got Nico over to do this. He always seems to want to pull the protective plastic off anything. I generally tend to leave it on forever. Now, as you can see, that protective plastic's kind of trapped between the window and the frame, so you'd have to undo all these screws if you want to get anal about removing all the plastic. It's probably not worth it. What you also get is these protective plastic sheets that go on the inside of the lid. They give you 5 extras of those. I'm kind of stingy with that sort of stuff. I keep dealing with not being able to see rather than just putting any transparency on it, so that's kind of stupid, but that's me. The whole thing's made out of powder coated steel, but it's only thin, about 1 millimeter, just 1.1, 1.2 thick. So it's thicker than a beer can. The back of the cabinet's got this light mounted with a light switch. There should be like a wall wart DC power supply, which I'm pretty sure I've lost because the light stopped working, so I'm going to have to pull that apart and I'll probably replace it with a brighter light anyway. Put some LED strips under all 4 edges or so to try and get more even and more powerful lighting. The main air inlet is just this normal pneumatic fitting down the back corner. Ideally I'd run a thicker line straight to my compressor's receiver. So you can see the pressurized air comes in through this hose, in through the bottom of the gun, and then it just siphons the media up through this big hose into the nozzle. Nozzle's ceramic. I don't know exactly what size it is. Gun works fine. I've never had any problems with it. I tend to put a lot of media in here, so I don't have too much of a problem with it sucking itself dry from media. But if it does, I tend to just take the nozzle and blow around all 4 corners, and then it pushes the sand back to the middle. Gloves seem to work fine. There's some sort of a fabric reinforced rubber material. They've got a bit of sort of blistering on the surface, but it doesn't seem to really affect their performance. Protect your hands fine, seem to last okay. Doesn't seem to bother them if the sand hits them. The gloves are held onto the outside of the blasting cabinet with a band clamp around through here. There's only a normal straight edged lip for them to grip onto. So if you create a vacuum in your cabinet, it just pulls the glove off. Up here is the air outlet. It's just a hole in the side. It has this filtration system, this conical foam cover, and then a standard sort of air filter, conical air filter. This gets blocked up pretty fast. This doesn't seem to do much at all. And once this is all clogged, pressure builds up in the whole cabinet, and this lid's very flexible. The air pressure tends to bulge the lid, and you start getting dust coming out past these pretty ineffective foam rubber seals. It gets latched by these two cam locks on the sides. They work fine. Unfortunately, the actual door itself is just really not rigid enough. The tapered bottom may not have quite enough angle so that the sand doesn't necessarily run down to the pickup point very well. Putting some sort of a vibrator on the outside of it would probably help that. What I've done, I cut a hole in the table which it's sitting on so that I can just dump the media out into a bucket underneath. There are two kinds of blasting media I use. The fine stuff is this. This is 100 to 200 grit glass beads. And for more coarse work, I've got this black slag. This is casting slag, or from the iron industry, which is this stuff. To show you how the Sandblaster works, the camera's got too many moving parts and it could get damaged with all the grit getting into it, so I'll shoot the next part using the phone. It's better sealed, no moving parts. I don't really want to get silicosis, so I use one of these P3 particle filters when I'm working with the Sandblaster. Because I work around aircraft, the company fitted us out with these fitted, customised earplugs. Obviously nobody at Noirot sails or flies because the red one is the right hand side. Port wine's red and the ship left port. My compressor's this 2.5 horsepower single phase machine. I'll just check the oil level. Yeah, that looks fine. Since it's only mounted on a 50 litre receiver, I plumbed in a second 50 litre that I picked up second hand. It's still not enough air capacity to keep that Sandblaster going continuously. I'd say I end up with a sandblasting duty cycle of about 50%. It's a noisy beast, so I keep it locked up here in my furnace room, and I've just got it plumbed into a copper tube running through the rest of my basement with drops into the other rooms where I use them. Just get the water out of the water trap. This is the Shelblin oil tank. I've already sandblasted most of the paint off the inside, but there's still a little bit stuck in places. I'll try one more time with the fine blasting media, and if that doesn't work, we'll switch to the coarse stuff. Temporary light. You can see now that all of the media has been pushed up to the corners. I wasn't actually pulling any media. As I say, every so often I just have to blast around the corners to sort of push it back to the middle. This is where a vibrator would be better. When they made this, they did go to trouble of putting some like rubbery sealant around here. Feels a lot like Aircraft Pro Seal. Fun fact, Aircraft Pro Seal, like PR 1422, back when I first started, used to have strontium as its catalyst. How's that for a bad sounding idea? Now the siphon pickup looks like this. It's just like a bolt with holes drilled into it. Unfortunately, that thread is also the drain thread, so you have to sort of reach from above and from below to put that drain closeout back in. This is the floor that you put the parts to be sandblasted on. You can see their powder coating's actually held up quite well. Now as you can see, there's a fair bit of dust floating around in the room. On this job, that coarser slag casting media did a really nice job. Seems to have taken basically all of the paint off. That was hard to remove with the fine stuff. So let's summarize. What are the good things about it? Well, the main one, it's cheap. Really cheap. 160, 170 bucks. It's also very easily available. I'm sure you can find them at any sort of junk tool hardware store sort of place. To be fair, it does sort of work. And by that, I mean its job is to throw blasting media at your parts hard enough to take off paint and rust and stuff like that. And it kind of does that. But what doesn't work so well? The lid is basically rubbish. It doesn't seal properly. It's too flexible. And therefore flexible. Oh man, my wife always gives me heaps for all the typos I make in my videos. I guess the second thing is it takes a lot of air. You could probably change that gun, get a nozzle that's maybe a little bit smaller that would need less air, but if you want to try and run one of these things off one of those little tiny sort of half horsepower compressors, forget it, you'll be wasting your time. That 2.5 horsepower compressor I'm using with 100 litres of receiver seems to be about the minimum you'd want to try with it. Oh, I just remembered the gloves are pretty good and it doesn't seem to clog the gun, but on the negative side the filtering is rubbish and also the angle of the floor doesn't really feed the nozzle. So based on all that, I do understand there's probably plenty of people who take one look at this and go, man, this is just crap. Don't bother buying it, it's a complete waste of money. And I understand that sentiment, definitely. You know, especially if you're using this in a place that you kind of got to keep clean, it's pretty much useless, or at least you'd have to do a fair bit of modification to make it useful. But if you're willing to do a few mods, I think the first one would be new lid. You know, make up some sort of a frame out of angle iron or something, or square tubing, something with, you know, steel tubing, welded, something more rigid with some torsional strength to it. Maybe add extra clamps. Maybe thicker seals. So that should address the sand falling out the top problem. The next thing would be a better filter system for it. You know, ideally something with a vacuum maybe. Although just adding a vacuum cleaner doesn't work. I've tried that. Adding a vacuum cleaner just sucks the... Oh, I think vacuum doesn't have that many U's and C's or something. Oh yeah. Yeah, adding a vacuum to it as it is doesn't work. It just pulls the gloves into the thing. Next thing you could probably do is make a new bottom for it with steeper angle. I saw that base is just bolted on. So instead of having them with a very flat sort of angle, you could make something steeper so that the blasting media continually runs down to the pickup port. Oh, I forgot to mention crappy lighting. Failed pretty quickly on mine. So new light. There's probably some aftermarket guns out there which would take less air pressure to do the same job. If you do all of these mods, all that you're really keeping is just the main outside frame, and $160 for 4 sides of thin sheet metal is a waste of money. If you're going to go to all the effort to make this perfect, you're better off probably starting from scratch. Make the box out of either wood or sheet metal and just buy some sort of a decent gun for it. Up to you. So there you have it. My thoughts on this cheap and nasty Sandblaster. Would I recommend it? Well, only really if you've got space to use it outside and a big compressor, or if you've got kind of a dirty room which you don't mind getting sand blown around. Otherwise, if you're going to start modifying this thing and try to make it perfect, you're really polishing a turd. You're better off starting either from scratch or starting with something better. Thanks a lot for watching. I appreciate it. And if you have any comments, feedback, I'd love to hear it. Please put it in your comment section.